Good morning. We are reviewing the conclusion of Ayin Beis, and we are on page 1385. Aleph Shin Pei Hey, where he is winding down the discussion of Mikra, Mishnah, Talmud, and namely the difference between Torah Shebiksav and Torah Shebal Peh, which he compares to Chochma and Bina. That's the levels of Chochma and Bina, masculine and feminine, which we learned yesterday. Bina Yeseda Nitna Be'isha Yesem Be'ish. Exactly as we discussed earlier, that the Ish, Chochma, provides the Nekuda, the seed, the kernel, and everything is encompassed in there, but it's concealed. Coming from the Sheresh Shemaka, from the source, but it's like a Nekuda. What's revealed is the Nekuda. Bina, like the woman, doesn't just reveal the Nekuda, she not only reveals it, but it develops as a Koyach Atzma, it's her own power. The woman has the power of give birth, provided that the seed fertilizes. So you have both of them working together, and her power is coming, yes, it's traveling through the seed of Chochma, but it's coming from Torah Keser. Torah she'itra le'imay. Like he said, b'yem chasanose, the power of the Torah, eishes chayil ateres bayil. And so too with Torah shebiksav and Torah shebal peh. Torah shebiksav b'chinas chochma sefer Torah, sheba b'chinas sefer b'chinas gilir baruch, that Hashem, every word, as it says, mashenavarer b'sherish shemokar chochmas haTorah shebe'efen kach b'chach, yamitis gilir chochma chuven lechochmos ha'atzmis. So every letter in the Torah is precisely aligned with the Chochma Atzis because Chochma the Ein Sof. But the Gilui comes in the Mitzumtzum. It's a book. It comes in letters and words. So that someone who can read those words, the author of it, sees all of that. But the recipient, Mashiach is B'chinas Gili. So the Pnimius and Atzmis, because it's so intense and such a high level, so it comes in a concealed way, so these letters are potent and concentrated with them as a tremendous amount, is Ein Sof Mamish, the Chochma of Ein Sof. However, it's packaged, so to speak, in letters and words so we can be able to receive it. But then how do we extract all that depth? That's going to come after the parentheses, which you're going to learn now. He says, V'yesh leimer, I'm on the seventh line rather, top of page 1385. The pages can be found at ayinbeis.com. So he says now, V'yesh leimer, the b'matan teira, nimshar b'teira b'pchinas gniza v'helam b'chinas primis el yena, har b'yesu b'chinas ha-teira kamishi l'mayla. Okay, so he's addressing an issue, which is when we say Torah, I'll translate the words in a moment. When we say Torah, what do we mean by Torah? We know that it's Alpayim Shana Kodma Torah La'elam. The Torah precedes existence, because the Torah is actually the blueprint of existence. Istaka baraisa ubara alma. God looked into the Torah and created the world. Like the Medrash says, it was mentioned earlier, Pisrois or Pinkasois, like an architect who has a blueprint. The Torah is God's blueprint. That's why it says the double expression, Vayemer Elikim Yehi Oyer, Vayehi Oyer. It should just say Vayivra Elikim Oyer, or Vayehi Oyer. So the Medrash and the Zohar explains, Vayemer Elikim, he read in the Torah, in his own blueprint, Vayemer, he said and read the word Oyer, Vayehi Oyer, and based on that, he created Oyer. So Torah precedes existence. Because as we said, Torah is essentially the divine infinite wisdom packaged in a sefer. However, we know Mattan Torah is a monumental event. Even though Torah precedes existence, when was it given to the world? Formally, it was given by Mattan Torah. We also know that the Ovis and Odem and Chava and the patriarchs and everyone, They learned Torah before it was given. They also knew what it says in Torah. So he's going to address. So when we say Torah, that Torah reveals that in the Sefer, that in the words, remember those words were delivered by Mattan Torah. Anochi Hashem Elokecha. Till then, we don't know. Till Mattan Torah, there were those that knew what it said there, but it was not formal. And so he's going to explain now what happened actually by Mattan Torah in this context. So he says, Yeshlemer, we can say by Mattan Torah, Nimshach b'Torah, something happened. It wasn't just the Torah that was there before. Something new happened. In Torah was Nimshach b'Bchinas Gniza v'Helem. What he just said, that concealed and hidden and concealed in the letters of the Sefer of the Torah, the Tachlis, I'm sorry, a deeper element of Pnimius from the source, much more much more than the Torah the way it is Lamaila before it was given down on earth. Gam Kamoshi Batsilis, even the way it's in Atsilis, Ulamaila Matsilis. So in other words, Torah travels all the way from the highest levels through all the worlds. And that's higher than Atsilis and Atsilis. And that was there before the Torah was given, meaning given on earth. But then in the year 2448, actually, yes, in the year 2448, that's the exact year of Mattan Torah, 26 generations after the creation of the world, meaning 26 generations from Adam till Noach is 10 generations, from Noach to Avram is another 10, 20, and from Avram till Moshe is the 7th, so it's 26 generations until Moshe, and Moshe, the Der HaShvi, from Avram, that's when Torah was given. When Torah was given, it wasn't just taking the Torah from Atzilus and putting it on earth. The true purpose of Torah was being revealed because the Torah is meant to transform this world. That's why Torah lo b'shamayim hi. Torah is not in heaven. And even though the angels claimed it as theirs, Moshe explained to them at Hashem's direction that Torah is given for earth. So by Mattan Torah, it wasn't just a technicality that the same Torah, a new level, he says clearly, that he says here, Pnimius Elyena Harbe Yeser, than what was there in the Torah in its source, in Atzilus and higher than Atzilus. That's by Mattan Torah, which explains, of course, the Chiddush of Mattan Torah. So that which we're saying earlier, that in the Sefer, in Mikra, in the Torah Shebiksav, lies what he said, B'chuven l'chachmoseh atzmis, b'chinas chochma de Ein Sof, that on the deepest level happened by Mattan Torah, which also explains what we know by Mattan Torah was also given the power to transform the physical world into a chefza shel kedusha. The others didn't have that power. They knew the Torah like informally. They knew it through their own instinct. They knew it through the prophecy. They knew it through whatever it is that they allowed them to know Torah in their relationship with God, but it was not formal. That's why they did not have the power to take a physical object besides bris, milah, which is the only mitzvah Hashem told Avram. Besides that, they could not transform the physical world. They could be very spiritual. They could bring spirituality, but not transform the world. And Chassidus explains, because to do that, it's not enough just to have the Torah. You have to have the etzem haTorah. The Torah as it originates in its core source, which has the power to come into the material world and actually transform it. Not just illuminate it, transform it. So just elaborating a bit more. He says that's a yesh lemer b'chinas pnimius harbe yeser. U'kamei b'moshel hanal. There's a parenthesis that goes another. It's a relatively long parenthesis. Like an example that we gave over earlier. What was the example? Remember that an author, to write something down in writing, the b'chdei lohavias hadover b'ksav, in order to bring something down in writing, and remember Torah shebiksav, the written Torah was given by Mattan Torah. Even though the others may have known Torah before, they knew Torah before, but it doesn't say anywhere they received a Torah with 600,000 letters and all the details of the Torah. So in order to bring it down b'ksav, tzorich la'ayin heitiv, you have to dig deeper, you have to delve deeper. Be'etzem koyach chachmoseh be'emek haseichel. in the very core Chochmose be'emek hasech. So in a sense, by Mattan Torah, because it was coming down in written form, like a book, a sefer, the author, meaning Hashem, had to reveal even a deeper level from etzem koyach hachochma to bring it into writing. So it's true from the point of view of the recipient. It's still concealed, but it's there. So all that concentrated potency in Torah Shebiksav by Mattan Torah came from this deeper aspect, like an author who has to go deeper into the idea in order to put it down in writing. And of course, Divrei Sofrim, as we'll soon learn, that's what they do. Through their effort, they delve to understand the deeper meaning in what the author wrote in that book. And that's why they were able to reach the root of it, which we'll soon get to. But right now, he's still talking about the process of putting it in writing. So this helps explain a bit what we've also learned earlier about when we said sefer, sipur, what sefer really is. Yeah, in Torah Shebiksav. The Yesh Leimer, Rebbe Rashab adds another Yesh Leimer, we can say, the Gemara says that before you say something, you have to review. You should review it 4 times within yourself. In other words, you don't just go ahead and express yourself. You have to look deep and probe and prepare yourself 4 times. It says, means like as reviewing it within yourself before you express it. And it's explained elsewhere. This, I believe, in Likutei Torah at the end, the Hisofis of Bechukosai, at the end of the Hisofis of Vayikra on Likutei Torah, I think that's where he says this. So he says this idea, what means speaking 4 times L'mayla? So he says that's the Hamshacha that it transmits that transmits the Torah from level to level. So obviously Hashem does not have to review it for himself, so to speak, for him to understand it. But what's the Dalapom is going through the 4 levels. I believe he says the 4 worlds. So Hamshacha from level to level. So that is one explanation in Beit Ben. Here he's going with another explanation that it means going deeper into the very idea. Ach yesh leimer, he says, Gamkein. So in addition to what it says elsewhere, that this is the idea of being mamshel l'teira through darga l'darga, madrega l'madrega, ach yesh leimer. However, you could also say, yesh leimer Gamkein, shazel al derech moshlai iyun ba'atzmei. This review 4 times is not just a hamshacha bringing Torah downward, in other words, preparing yourself how to bring the Torah down. It's also iyun ba'atzmei. It's an internal, in-depth introspection, so to speak, in kavyachol. So it's not just about the mamshacha, but it's going deeper within yourself, preparing yourself how to express the eir of Torah and the proper letters and combinations. So what he's adding is that without this point, you could say the preparing 4 times is how to is the actual steps of how to communicate it. But he's adding now the iyun ba'atzmei, because that's what he wants here. He wants to show that that in order to bring it into writing, you have to go deeper into the idea in order to be able to express it. So it's not it's a continuation of the original explanation. You want to express it level by level to the lower levels. What are the right words and the right combinations? You have to go deeper into the Chochma Atzmis in order to express it. V'im kain. So based on this, Niglis b'zeh b'chinas er pnimi v'atzmi yesed. So therefore, by Mattan Torah, when this came down into writing for the first time, so in this written Torah, there's a deeper inner and core oir than in the Torah as it is Lamaila before it comes down into writing. That's what he adds here. V'zeu gamken inyan ba'atorah she'itralai. And this is consistent with what we learned earlier. This is the connection to the Torah, the crown that the mother weaves for B'yem Chasanose Zeh Mattan Torah, B'yem Chasanose Zu Mattan Torah. So there's the connection. Mattan Torah is the Yom Chasana, and the Torah is given specifically, like you said, for the Hashpah by Mattan Torah, by Yom Chasanose. Like you said on top of the page, where he said, I'm sorry, at the bottom of the previous page, B'yom Chasanose dafka letzedach hashpah. So you're getting a deeper amshacha in order to be mashpia, just like the woman gets a deeper hashpah in order to give birth, and the whole birthing process. Shateidah b'chinas tipas mad. Teira is the tipas mad, is the seed of Chochma, Mayan Tchurin, the masculine seed, waters, v'neshamas Yisrael, and here he explicitly does say neshamas Yisrael, which we discussed yesterday a bit, and we'll discuss a lot later. Later he's going to discuss neshamas Yisrael and Teira in detail. Neshamas Yisrael hem b'chinas kala. They're the bride. So Teira is the chasen, and then neshamas Yisrael b'chinas kala. B'chinas keli klibul klei kibul. That's the container to receive. Shemakablim eira Teira ba'atzmam. That they're receiving the Torah ba'atzmam within themselves, the primistic way. So therefore, b'yem chasanose, when they join together, you don't just get Torah as it is in Atzilus and higher than Atzilus L'mayla, which is a high level, but you're getting from the previous aspects from Torah, the Torah that is weaved, particularly the Keser, that is weaved for the b'yem chasanose. So that's all as it is regarding Torah Shebiksav, that you have this deeper dimension of Pnimi and Atzmi from Mokerach, from Etzem Koyach HaChochma. However, like you said, all this is concentrated and hidden within Torah, but it's a very tremendously high level, even higher than Torah as it is pre the written Torah, before it was written down and delivered and given by Mattan Torah. So that ends the parentheses. Let me stop if anybody wants to ask anything. So just to emphasize, here he's still focusing on Hashem giving the Torah. He's not addressing what Neshamas Yisrael do through their learning Torah. It's true, they're the recipients. Mattan Torah, the Eibishter gave them the Torah, the Neshamas Yisrael. So that's the Chasana. Torah and Neshamas Yisrael joining together, and it's coming from the Torah. But we still have not gotten to what Neshamas Yisrael contribute in the process. Didn't address that yet. That's Torah Shebal Peh already. So we'll talk about that now. And as I said, he'll develop this as we go further.
I just want to comment that, like a cipher has to work super hard to minimize the amount of words he uses all the way down, and that's the Torah Shebechtav. That goes even further into the Aseret Dibros, right? Because that's what we got.
Yeah, I mean, the whole Torah is encompassed in Aseret Dibros. Aseret Dibros are all encompassed in Anoichi, Hashem Elokecha, all in the word Anoichi, and all in the first letter Aleph. Correct.
So it's interesting that the first two Dibros have so many words, like about them.
Tmuna. They have 620 letters to be exact.
Oh, interesting. Oh, wow.
Says,
but then each word is so much more.
Keser. Keser words. It's Tafresh Chof. It's explained because of Keser, and it's the Taryag mitzvahs and the 7 mitzvahs, the Rabbanan, or 7 mitzvahs of the Bnei Neach. Different ways it's explained, but it's exactly 620 letters. Yeah, and the Rasag, Psad Yugon, explains that the whole Torah is encompassed in those letters, in the Aseret Dibros. All the Aseret Dibros are encompassed in the first 2 Dibros, Anoichi and La'yilecha. The Alter Rebbe explains that in Tanya, chapter 20. And then everything in Anoichi Hashem Elokecha, everything in the word Anoichi, and the whole Anoichi in the letter Aleph.
Wow.
It's broad. The Rebbe brings it in a number of sikhs and different svarim talk about it.
So we really have to look at each and every single word in the Aseret Dibros because they were each picked so meticulously.
Yeah, here he's not going into Aseret Dibros particularly. He's going into the whole Torah Shebiksav, but the same as with Torah Shebiksav. Every letter, kol koitz v'koitz, we learned Rabbi Akiva, but Aseret Dibros even more so. Correct.
By the way, the word kites, I was thinking later, it's like kol hakitzin, like the end of times. Maybe we could call it like the ends, the pointy ends, anyway.
This is all for the Torah Shabbat Peh. The Rebbe Rashab does not talk about that. I just want to distinguish between them. There are many things that you can derive from what we're learning. I always make a big distinction between what he writes and what he says. And then, yeah, you can make many connections. I'm not suggesting you can't. I'm just trying to stay very loyal and true to the original material here.
No, I
But
was just talking about the
everything's connected
translation.
to everything if you really want.
Right. No, I was just talking about the translation of the word koitz shel yud, that it could also mean
My
end.
translation is the word is point. That's really the meaning here. The nakuda as a nakuda. Koitz, kol koitz, koitz, every point, like a koitz on top of a yud. Koitz is shel yud. So it means either the edge, but you're referring to the koitz, the end, but it could be the edge. Edge is also a word for mikates. He mikates.
Yeah, and then it has more meaning too, because it's the end, like maybe
Yeah, but
that's
remember,
also
the
meaningful.
deeper meanings are not what the Rebbe Rashab is talking about. That's my point. When he speaks here koitz, he means the koitz that is on top of the yud. That's what he's referring to. He's not talking about a kes of Golos, not talking about Mashiach. Can you read into it for your own purposes? Fine, but it's not the pshat in Ayin Beis. That's all I'm
No,
distinguishing.
I'm not either. I'm just saying that we could look at the koitz shel yud as the end of the yud, and maybe that means some things, somehow. I don't know.
Well, here it simply means that a yud has a point, and that point has much depth in it. And
Right.
Rabbi Akiva is able to draw out that depth from every why is there a point there? Why is the yud have or every other kates in the Torah? Okay. So now he's going to go now to
Sheva
Torah
mitzvahs
Shabbat.
bnei Noach, Kesar is known for the 7 mitzvahs Rabbanon, but Sheva
I
mitzvahs
told you
bnei
in some
Noach.
places it says Sheva Mitzvahs B'nei. That's what makes the 620, 613 plus 7. In different places, you can look it up. It's discussed. So now that we address Torah Shebiksav Chochma, now he's going to go to Bina Torah Shebal Peh. The Kol Zeh and all of this that we just discussed, that is Gonuz Venelam, that is concealed and hidden in the written Torah, and has all that potency, especially by Mattan Torah that you just said, even Primius Yesir, then the Torah as it is Lamaila and Mail Matzilis even. Kol Zeh Hushem Izgalo Misracha B'Torah Shebal Peh. All this is what expands. Well, it was revealed, Mizgala, gets revealed and expanded in the oral Torah. So the oral Torah is taking this, the Kudus, these Asis of Torah Shebiksav, and expanding it and revealing its deeper meaning, the details, and so on. Al Yedei HaTalmid Chachamim. And who does it? The sages. Shanikram Seifrim, that are called scribes, like we learned earlier, Seifrim. Shehem HaMegalim. He said Seifrim is Ha'esius. As we explained, it doesn't just mean counting the letters. It means probing, dissecting, analyzing, evaluating. They are the ones that reveal Mashagonus Venelam Ba'esis the Torah Shebiksav. They reveal what is hidden and concealed in the letters of the written Torah. Exactly what Bina does to Chochma. And how do they do that? What power do they have? Because through their effort, like we learned earlier, their yigiyah, their exertion, with Mesiras Nefesh, with total devotion and dedication, they reach into the Sheirish Shemakar HaChochma. They're going back to the source code of where those letters originated from. Where did they originate? Like we said, they reach all the way from the highest source, especially by Mattan Torah. So in order to reveal it, you have to go back, so to speak, to the source. B'chinas Sefer Hanal. Back to the Sefer. Who's the Sefer? The original Sefer is Hashem. Shlishi HaMedaber. Shalamayla b'chinas Gili HaChochma Mesharsha. That's higher than the revelation of Chochma from its roots. Chochma also comes, the Nekuda of Chochma, the letters, and the point of Chochma also comes from its root. But there, the Gilui is a very limited one. It's a Nekuda. Here, what they're doing, accessing from the Sheresh Hamokah that's higher than Gilui, and therefore they, from there, which as we learned earlier, that's in a state of expansion, not mitzias, but it's expansive, and from there they draw and reveal and expand the nekuda of Chochma. No need to elaborate more because this was elaborated upon the last few pages in detail. What the process. Now the Rebbe Rashab is starting to bring it back to Talmud, Mishnah and Talmud. Because he still, if you see, you notice he didn't say Talmud here yet. He said in the beginning, he said beginning of Talmud is through Choshech, through the questions and answers, and Talmud reaches deeper. But since he's been speaking about Sofrim, he was talking about all Sofrim. Sofrim include Mishnah also. So now he says like this, and this is a key line. And in general terms, what we're talking about is in general Torah Sheba'al Peh. All Torah Sheba'al Peh. Shemavayah Torah Shebiksav. That's what Torah Sheba'al Peh does. All Torah Sheba'al Peh, the Mishnah included. What is it doing? Is the oral interpretation and explanation of the written Torah. Even in the time of Moshe Rabbeinu, Torah b'pirusha nitna. Torah is the written pasuk. Bereshis bara lakim es hashemayim v'sa'aretz. V'kshartem leis al yadecha. These are all the words of the written Torah. And at the same time, the Eibishter interpreted Torah Sheba'al Peh. The Torah Sheba'al Peh in general is this state of explaining what's written in Torah Shebiksav. But this is in general. U'b'derech prat, he continues, U'b'derech prat, u'b'talmud, u'pirush u'bir ha'mishnah. When you break it down more in detail, like we're speaking, there's in general in detail, this is referring to in Talmud, because the Talmud does this even further. It explains, it interprets and explains. Pirush, it explains. It interprets and explains the Mishnah. So in the general, it's Torah Sheba'al Peh altogether, all the entire Torah Sheba'al Peh, and more specifically, it's Talmud. The halacha sheba Mishnah. Now, relatively speaking, going back again to ideas we learned earlier, the halachas as they're written in the Mishnah, even though relative to Mikra, to the written Torah, it's already elaborating and breaking down into halachas. But compared to the next generation, so as much as it's interpreting, it still it has within it, like we learned, a Gili Eira Chochma from a Chochma Brura. Because remember, we learned that Mishnah and the Chachmei Mishnah were linked ish pi ish in a clear and crystallized way. Chachmei law of Torah Shebiksav illuminated Chachmei Tata of Mishnah. Ukamation is bar le'il, like we learned earlier, page 1377. The Ad Rabbeinu HaKadosh, until Rabbi Rabbeinu HaKadosh, the compiler of Mishnah, Hoyagili Eira Chochma. There was the Gili Eira Chochma from the time of Moshe. Ubamokim Achem Muvur, Ad Rav Shmuel. That it went another generation, to Rav and Shmuel. This actually he mentioned earlier at the top of page 1380. Now he adds Rabbi Yechanan. There he only said Rav and Shmuel. If you go back there, he only said Rav and Shmuel at the top of the page. Now he's adding also Rabbi Yechanan. So we see that is a particular stage, an era, which came to an end. So though the Mishnah is Torah Sheba'al Peh, but he's explaining in Torah Sheba'al Peh, it's still a state of high level of Gilui. V'chol dvoreihem, and all their words, the words of whom? Of the Bali Mishnah. Everything that Rabbi Beinu HaKadosh compiled. And now he's saying also Rav and Shmuel and Rabbi Yechanan, Hoyudivrei Kabbalah ish mipi ish. They were received man from mouth to mouth, back to Moshe, back to Hashem. Commission is bar le'il. Uba the dvarim ktsarim. And the Mishnah, it comes in short terms. It's not as short, of course, as like Mikra. That's why it's an explanation of Mikra. But relatively speaking, it's bedvarim ktsarim b'bchinas gile er mavura. So for those that understand it, it's a Gilia Er Mavura. It's a completely crystallized clear. Kamoy Shahu, exactly as it is, in a pristine and preserving the integrity exactly as it was, Ish Mipi Ish, all the way back to Moshe Mattan Torah. So he's explaining why Mishnah is still Mishnah and Talmud is going to be a next level. We didn't get to Talmud yet. He's still explaining Mishnah. But what he's saying here is really the ideas he already discussed earlier. But it's now the context is, we're talking going from Mikra to Mishnah. And though in Mishnah it did clarify details of the mitzvah, that's why it's Mishnah. That's Torah Shabbat Peh. It's clarifying things that the verse doesn't have clear from the point of view of the student, of the recipient. B'kol mokim, and here's where Mishnah does not require, Mishnah in a sense requires Talmud. B'kol mokim, kol prat hurak b'kitzur dvarim. Nevertheless, even though it is delineating and explaining the details of Torah Shebiksav, but it's still b'kitzur dvarim. Relatively speaking, it's still brief. And it's known and clear only to whom the Eira Chochma illuminates and radiates, like we learned earlier. Rabbeinu HaKadosh, yes. Now Rav Shmuel Rabbi Yochanan, yes. The generations before that, yes. They all had that clear link. Ukmoy Moshe Rabbeinu Olav HaShalom, like we learned earlier, that Moshe Rabbeinu Olav HaShalom, Sheyoda HaKol b'Torah Shebiksav. He was able to see it all in Torah Shebiksav, and we actually spelled out earlier, and he also received Torah Shebal Peh, but everything was clear to him. Kamoy Kain HaTanoim Yodu HaKol M'teich Mishnasam. So here we now see a little distinction. The same thing, the Tanoim, which is the Balei Mishnah, they knew everything with M'teich Mishnasam, from their learning of the Mishnah. Their Mishnah, they had it all clear. So till now, he didn't make a distinction between Moshe and the generations afterwards, till the Tanoim. But now, it appears there is a small distinction. He's saying here, Moshe could see it from Torah Shebiksav. And indeed, he did have Torah Shebal Peh too. I refer you back to the page where he said this. It was very, very clear. I stopped there as well. He said that right here. On page 1377, he says, Moshe was a keli legili, umekitzer adova shabbatei shekusav yoda kol prate dinei mitzvah. So when he saw the pasuk ukshartem, he knew all the details of mitzvah film. Omnom gam prate mitzvah nemru leMoshe Sinai, and we stopped and discussed that. And yet at the same time, also the details were said to Moshe Sinai. But you see clearly that Moshe had that deeper consciousness, deeper awareness, even in the written Torah. So were the details that was said by Sinai for Moshe? You could say yes. It helped obviously bring out, express, because Hashem did tell him, Mem tes ponim toyer, mem tes tamim tomei, the 49 facets of how to explain it in one way or to explain it a different way. But clearly he had obviously a deeper connection. He's Moshe Kibbutz Torah Sinai, so it makes sense. He's like the first conduit. So he's clearly learning straight from Hashem. So he had the ultimate clarity. As the generations went, even though the clarity remained till the time of the Mishnah, but it's obvious that you can't compare Rabbeinu HaKadosh to Moshe. They are different. However, it still was illuminated to them. So in that sense, in that context, Moshe Rabbeinu, he's saying he knew it from Torah Shebiksav, and the Tanuim knew it all from the Mishnah, which of course the Mishnah is an explanation of Torah Shebiksav. So this is all the first stage of the Mishnah, Torah Shebal Peh. But like he said before, that's B'derech Klal. When we're talking B'derech Klal, Torah Shebal Peh, B'derech Prat, now comes the Talmud. So here's what he says now. Well, let me stop here if anybody wants to ask anything. He's going to go to the Talmud in a moment. Just to clarify, if anybody wants to ask about anything that I just explained.
That means that everything that the Amoyroim later, with Yegia, they reach the sheresh or moker HaChochma
We
before
didn't
the
learn that
Chochma.
yet. We're going to learn that now. Right now, he spoke about Mikra and Mishnah. I mean, earlier we learned he's going to now spell out exactly this. He's now coming to the next stage, Talmud. So I would hold that thought till the next few lines. Ach, inyan ha-Talmud. Now, however, in contrast, what is the inyan of Talmud? Gemara, Talmud, hu shenesalam b'chinas eira chochma. This eira chochma that radiated, illuminated from the time of Moshe all the way to Rabbeinu HaKadosh, all the way to Rav Shmuel and Rabbi Yechanan, was concealed. So what do you do now? When it's clear, so the Mishnah has everything clear, it knows all the details, and explaining the Mikra. But now comes the next generation where it's concealed. So this is what their role is. Umavayirim umafarshim es haMishnah al pi hasagosam ha'amiti. So they come, the Amoraim, and they explain and interpret the Mishnah according to their understanding, but he calls it hasagosam ha'amiti, because they're not simple people. They are ultimately Amoraim, and they are students of the Tanoim. So we're not talking about somebody just from nowhere. We're talking about major scholars. But they don't have the benefit of the level of gili that their teachers had and that the generations before had. So it's asargosam amiti. As we learned earlier, when they struggle and they study, Hashem helps them to be machavan. And they themselves are people of humility and yiras shamayim and mesiras nefesh. So it's hasagam, but it's hasargosam. It's not Kabbalah ish mepish. It's not what they heard. What they heard, they heard. Here they're working with their minds to try to understand what is the Mishnah trying to say. And here the real Bina comes out. Even though he said before Teresh Shabbat in general is Bina, but B'derech Prat, they're doing this B'bchinas Habina, in the level of Bina, the Ribu Yegiyah, with tremendous amount of exertion, Ubepilpul Otzim, and intense debate and deliberation and discussion, become a kushis with terutzim, with numerous questions and answers. Questions immediately tells you that something's not clear, so they question and answers. Ad shehitziu, to the point that they're able to extract and draw out esadin, the law la'irei ulamitase, with clarity and with truth. The true meaning of what it says in the Mishnah, which in turn is interpreting the Mikra, the Psukim. So this is the ultimate Torah Shabbat Peh, the ultimate level, what he said before, B'derech Klal is Torah Shabbat Peh, B'derech Prat to B'Talmud, which is the Pirush of Bir Mishnah. And now we understand this context, the Mishnah's role, and then comes the next stage, the Talmud's role. And the details which they enumerated, that they extracted, here's what these are what they brought in a revealed state, mashanelam v'gonus, which was concealed and hidden, so it was hidden and concealed in the Nekudas HaChochma of Mishnah, and also Nekudas of the Eisius of Mikra. But how did they do this? Because through their effort, they reached the Sheirush HaMokar HaChochma. They went back to the mouth of the well, the source of it all. Shalamaylam Ebchinas HaGili, higher than the Gili that was revealed in the Mishnah, which is only short Nekudas, which that alone was not enough for them to find this clarity, because they didn't have the Chochma Ilah radiating Chochma Tata as their teachers did, as the generations before did. So their effort has to go back to the source to draw this clarity that initially was not clear. Exactly as we learned earlier. The Ima Yes, and now he's qualifying an important point, which we discussed, but he's spelling it out, which is very good. Even
which
though
is the Bina, right? What they are doing
Bina,
is the
B'chinas
Bina.
Habina.
Yeah.
He says B'chinas Habina, yeah. The ima yes, you could say, 1 second, you're saying they're going back to the Sheresh Shemukah, but everything that they teach, called V'reihem, Huma Mishnah, Huma Mikroyas. They're not coming to say new things. They are, everything that they're saying is from the Mishnah. You look in the Gemara, you'll see it's a Mishnah, a line from the Mishnah that they are discussing. Huma Mikroyas. And from the verses of the written Torah that they're all basing these ideas on. Ukamoi my timer omakra, a very classic and common expression in the Talmud. My timer, what's his reason? What's your reason, or what's his reason? The omakra, because it says so in the pasuk. So in other words, they're drawing it from the pasuk, which seems to be chochma gluya. Nevertheless, however, their effort of drawing out where they're drawing out from is not from the level of the gili in the chochma shebeteira or shebe mishnah, the wisdom within the written Torah and within the Mishnah, because that is left cryptic or unclear. Rak min masha gonus v'nelam. They're drawing it out from what is concealed and hidden in the Mishnah and in the oral and in the written Torah. So, for example, the example he gave, Eila Hadvarim. So, Eila Hadvarim is a pasuk. How do you know it's referring to Lamates Malachis? Doesn't say so. You have to learn the gematria, and you have to understand what means Hadvarim, the Hey, Dvarim plural, as they explain in the Gemara. That is not. It's based on the pasuk. They're drawing it out of the pasuk, but how are they drawing it out? By accessing that which is hidden in those letters, which means they're going into the root and source. Because in the letters themselves, what's begoli in the Nakuda of Chochma, you don't see the Lamates Malachos. You need to go into that which is concentrated and contained in the letters, but it's hidden from view for someone that doesn't have that Chochma radiating or illuminating. And this is where they are accessing the true Eir of Torah, the truth of Torah Eir, of light of Torah, not just as it's revealed in the Nakuda, but the way it's aligned with the Sheresh Shemukah, from where the written Torah came from in the first place. Because remember, the written Torah, he said clearly, is the way God communicated and concentrated all the truth of Chochma Atzmis from Atzmus Ein Sof into words. However, from our point of view, remember, this is an interface between the divine and existence. How is existence in a concealed state access it and make sure it's aligned with that truth? That's through this reaching into the Sheresh Shemukah, B'chinas Mokar HaChochma. So essentially, drawing from the root and source, through the concealment, we're accessing the root and source and bringing it down into a world that initially did not have this clarity, because we're not on the level of the Bali Mishnah and the generations preceding them. And here's where he says that it's even deeper. And the laws that were nischadish, that were innovated through their debate, through their discussion, through their deliberation, are higher than the halachas that came b'derech Kabbalah. Im shehem b'chinas gili eira chochma. Even though b'derech Kabbalah has the gili eira chochma within them, but the gili eira chochma is a gili that's mitzumtzum. And here they're bringing the gili into an expansive state, meaning they're accessing the Sheresh Shemukah and revealing that. In Torah Shebiksav, the Sheresh Shemukah is not revealed to everyone, only to those that are on the level of Chochma. Like we learned earlier, Bina or the Amoraim, they reveal it to everyone in a airtight way, like we learned, with certainty, with a hechlech, removing all questions and sigim and pselis, like we said earlier, removing all doubts and questions, affirming it, and that adds a whole new level that he says is even higher than the halachas that were received ish mipish b'Kabbalah, which he already explained earlier, the idea behind that, because it's reaching deeper into the source. So this doesn't mean Torah Shebiksav does not have the source. However, it's not in a gilidik way. It's an asiyah. And Talmud is revealing it in a way that it's not just in story form and brief, in a way that we all understand what? The amitis of Torah. So basically, when we explain Torah, Mikra, written Torah, and Mishnah, the first stage of Torah Shabbat Peh, in a way that we can explain it to any person you meet. I'm giving you a practical Chassidus applied application here. You can explain it to anyone who cannot read Torah. Either they can't read Hebrew or they don't understand the meaning. But you sit and give a class and you explain it in a way someone says, oh, wow, that's Torah. What you've done is you've achieved something that even the written Torah and the Mishnah does not have on its own in a revealed way. Because what you've done is you've gone back to the source, Sheresh Shemaka of it all, and brought it down to a level that everybody could understand. That's not a small achievement. You've basically brought the emes of Elokus to places that it would not have been there were only Mikra Mishnah, because Mikra Mishnah was too concealed, too unavailable, or too inaccessible, I should say, due to its high level of revelation that only those that have that clarity can see it there. So yes, it is coming down a level. So on one hand, Talmud doesn't have the same level of Gedusha as a Sefer Torah, obviously. But on the other hand, in context of revelation and expressing it, bringing that etzem of Torah in a way that every person can understand it and in a compelling way, and so on, that is the achievement that comes through this. That's where he said earlier, if you recall, when he said, when he brought Arev Malai Divrei Sofrim Yesem Yeno Shel Torah at the bottom of 1381. Arev Malai Divrei Sofrim, more than the wine of Torah. So Torah, of course, written Torah is definitely a higher level. It's the wine, but there's some sweetness. That's even more so when you bring it down through the Sofrim, as they explain it, even in the world of Choshech, in a world where the clarity initially is not there. So you see here how Torah that we began learning on page 1350 is so critical in the interface. It's not just that Torah is shining a light. It's not just as God is telling us what to do. He's also giving us tools to understand and to be able to take the principles that are laid out in the written Torah and in Mishnah and bring it down to any possible level. That's ultimately what the Torah interface does in the connection and integration between divine and existence, the central theme of Ayin Beis. It's Mamayla Lamata. Why is it Mamayla Lamata? Because at the end of the day, the Amirayim are learning Torah. Like he said, my time in the Amar Kra. It's all based on Torah that God gave us. But there's a Mamata Lamayla here because there's the effort of our exertion and our effort of drawing it out. So you have the combination of both the divine revelation, but primarily our effort in understanding and appreciating it and internalizing it. Whereas Tefillah, the other approach, is primarily Mamata Lamayla. There you don't have the same level of revelation because you're not working with Torah. You're working with your initiative to daven. We'll talk about this again more later in detail, but I just wanted to contextualize it here. Okay, let me stop here for any questions. If there are questions.
Why did you say, I know you just said we're going to get there. I don't remember this discussion from before, but why do you say tefillah is primarily
you don't remember? Really? Interesting. I remember myself probably speaking about it at least 50 times.
No, hold on. I get that tefillah is from lamata lamayla. That wasn't my question. My question was your dagesh, your emphasis on primarily. Why is tefillah not exclusively lamata lamayla?
Because I explained in a previous class a few days ago, I think. Because at the end of the day, God gave us the mitzvah of tefillah. He gave us the words. They come from the Torah in many cases. Some were composed by people, that's correct, but a lot of it is, so to say it's completely, but it's initiated and generated by our needs. That's why I said primarily.
You mean because the mitzvah?
Bottom line, there's overlap. Just like in Torah, there's Mamayla Lamata, Mamat Lamayla. In Tefillah, there's also Mamayla Lamata elements, because God, as I said, He gave us the mitzvah of prayer. It's a mitzvah to pray.
Okay, that's what I started to say. Yeah,
and also words. Much of the words of tefillah come from psukim.
Torah. Yeah.
So there's an element. It's anyway.
Okay.
There's overlap, always overlap. There's nothing that's mutually exclusive.
Yeah, no. Makes perfect sense. I just wanted clarity on that. Thank you.
Okay. I thought you meant that you haven't heard me talk about.
Chas v'shalom. Then I don't know what I go from kicking me right out the door. No, I know.
No. But I will. Why I say I'm going to talk about this later more at length, because right now we're still learning the middle. When we start tying it all together, especially after we finish and see how Ner Mitzvah and Torah come into play, and then the other inyanim that he spoke about, Haria, obviously, and we're going to go back to the central themes of Mamat L'mayla, Mamayla Lamata, which is very important in this whole discussion. As a matter of fact, I think I may have mentioned in volume 2, he brings the Maimer HaMagbiel L'Shevis. I found that a while back, which only confirms the connection. But well, as I said, we'll learn that later. I don't want to confuse matters here. Are there any other questions? I think we'll stop here, even though I would have liked to go on to the end of the paragraph, but let me just see. Maybe I will go. Let me see what the story is.
Maybe you can just power through it without any interruptions, and then we can come back after your trip to Mexico, and you can maybe do a little more, Ian.
Yeah, that's what I was considering. Okay, we'll do that. V'ayim Asher Kosav Rambam B'Agdama L'Sefer Hayad. So the Rambam, in his introduction to Yad HaChazaka, he says the Rabbi Ashi was the last of the Amoraim, who doir harboim l'Moshe. He's the 40th generation from Moshe. V'hu inyan ben harboim l'bina. You'll see here a beautiful connection to it all. So 40th generation is not just by accident. It's the level of ben harboim to what? Bina. Remember, Torah Sheba'al Peh is bina. Not chochma. The koyim inish adaita derabba. We know at 40 years, a person arrives at the das to be able to appreciate the das of his the understanding of his teacher. That's also which we learn from actually the 40th year in the wilderness, where Moshe says that until now you didn't have leiv ladas, ayin lires, and so on. So this 40 of Rabashi, the end of the era of Amoraim of Talmud, is the ultimate bina. That means at that stage you reach to the eimek chachmase. So even though it's drawing it down, but what happens at 40? It's not just you understand it. You're getting back to the eimek, the depth that you didn't understand in the beginning. When you first learned it from your teacher, meaning when it was in the Mikra and the Mishnah, or say Mikra because he's talking about Moshe Rabbeinu, or about Torah Sheba'al Peh, even in the time of Moshe, you didn't understand. But I understand. But the 40 years brought you to a level of depth. Like it says elsewhere. But that adds to what we just learned. That's exactly what Talmud does. Through this whole process of deliberation of Bina, you're getting deeper to the Sheder Shemukah. So it can connect that to Rabashi being the 40th generation from Moshe. For Shamaiti, this is a very interesting line here. This the Rebbe brings in Hayem Yem and in several places. The Rebbe Rashab says like this: Shamaiti b'shem Rabbeinu nishmosei. I heard, the Rebbe Rashab is writing, I heard in the name of the Alter Rebbe. Rabbeinu Nishmosei is always the Alter Rebbe in this context. Shekol hamachabrim, all the authors Ad hataz b'shach. So now we're talking about many generations after the Amoraim. We're going now Rabbanan Savaroi, Ge'enim, Rishenim, Achreinim. Taz and Shach are Achreinim. They are the commentaries on the Shulchan Aruch. Taz and Shach are the main two commentaries in Shulchan Aruch, Chesha Mishpat, and other places. So what did the Alter Rebbe say? That the Rebbe Rashab heard? That till the Taz and Shach, the Heim Bechlal, including them, Asu Chibureim Beruch HaKedesh. They composed their compilations, their works, their commentary with Ruach HaKodesh, which means divine spirit. The in Ruach HaKodesh, and what's Ruach HaKodesh? What level of that? What level of revelation is Ruach HaKodesh? Isa beKarban Ha'eda, Seif Pei Gimel Deshkolim. Karban Ha'eda is a commentary in the Yerushalmi. At the end of chapter 3 of Shkolim, says Ruach HaKodesh Shezeu Shemagalim Loi Rozei Teira. Ruach HaKodesh is that they reveal to them, someone who has Ruach HaKodesh is revealed to them the Rozei, the secrets of Teira. Shezeu Mebchinas Helam de Chochma. Rozei is the secrets, like what we said. Gonos v'Nelam, it's concealed and hidden. That's coming from not Chacham Glui, the Nekuda Gluya, not the revealed part of Chacham, it's the concealed part. So the Rebbe Rashab is essentially saying, without going into much detail, that even though we've been speaking now Talmud, Rabash till Rabashi, that the truth is that all the generations till the Taz B'Shach, including them, had also an element of getting into the Helem of Chachma through their efforts of interpreting. Remember, Taz and Shach and all those before them, what are they doing? They're doing what the Amoraim did in their time. The Amoraim were doing it to the Mishnah. Rashi and the Rishenim do it to the Gemara, their commentaries, Rashi, Rambam, and so on. And so it goes through the generations. The Rosh, and then you have the Rishenim, then the Achreinim, and then you have the older generations. What are they doing? They're doing the same thing. They're working hard and trying to interpret, like remember, Pirush al Pirush. Because that generation, there was more concealment and we needed more clarity. So they're reaching into the Helem of Chochmah, basically. The thing is, the Rebbe Rashab doesn't delineate the details of this. It's all part of Torah Sheba'al Peh, but the focus in general is Mikra, Mishnah, Talmud, which usually ends with the Chsimas Hashas, which is the Amoraim. But in truth, the same principle can be applied to Torah even till this day. However, Taz and Shach clearly was the end of a certain era, the Ruach HaKodesh era. That's what he's saying. So now, let's conclude after the parentheses. V'zeu sha'talmud bebriyah. This takes us back now to the conclusion. Remember, Mikra ba'asiyah, Mishnah b'yitzirah. Mikra originates in the highest level, Chabad, which can't be revealed because of its intensity, so it's only an asiyah. Mishnah is revelation, the Chagas, Zoh of Yitzirah. Talmud is in Bria. And if you remember, Bria, Ubara Cheshach, is a state of darkness. Ba'amru b'machshakim eshivanu, Zu Talmud Bavli. As when we began discussing this whole idea, back on page, we spoke about the Shalah with page 1380, but even earlier, when he started with Talmud, it started actually on page 1372. So now he's summing it up. So it's a state of darkness. Why? Because initially it's a state of darkness, the Eira Chochma that was radiating, illuminating until Rabbeinu HaKodesh, and maybe the next generation after that was concealed. The halach is the Mishnah in B'chinas Gili Eira Chochma. The halach is the Mishnah is a state of Gili, not Machshakim. Machshakim and Shebani is on Talmud Bavli, not on Mishnah. Mashenkin a Talmud who shenis alam next page 1386. Mashenkin the Talmud is the next generation where the is concealed, Chochma is concealed, the Eina Meir Begili, and doesn't radiate in a revealed way. Umashum zeh, b'chinas cheshach v'helem, and that's why the Talmud itself comes into a state of darkness and concealment. B'ribui hakushis ve'alomis. with numerous questions and concealments. However, now come the Amoraim, the sages, the Seifrim. And what do? Through their effort, they start digging and probing to try to understand. Avol bezeh dafke, and that process, dafke in the darkness, himshichu b'chinas elyon yeser. They drew down and they transmitted even a higher level of light. And they illuminated the darkness that happened in the Oyer, that from the beginning of Helam the Chochma. It means the Sheder Shemoker. Who Gili Eira Emes, and this is the Gili Eira Emes, the revelation of the light of truth. Shakol Royen, like I said before, everyone sees and everyone recognizes. Amitis Eir the Torah, the truth of the light of Torah, even those dwelling in darkness. Ukamoshin is barely ill, as explained earlier. So they go beyond the Gili of the Kudah of Chochma that's there in Mishnah and Mikra, and they go all the way to the Sheder Shemoker, with the state of Helam, but from that Helam, they draw down and expand it in Bina and illuminate through Talmud Bavli.
Seems like the lower the generation, the higher
with that, he concludes this paragraph and also this whole section. After this, we're going to go back to the 3 levels of Er Makabel compared to the moon, the luminous stone, and vision and eyesight. But we'll stop here. And there won't be a class next 4 days, Sunday through Wednesday, no class. I'm out of town. Thursday we'll resume, and we'll go over this more in detail and explain it and so on. Yeah, we'll take a few questions. Go ahead. What were you asking? Sorry.
It seems like the lower the generation, the higher the Ruach HaKodesh. I mean, we have the Rebbe. I mean,
it doesn't say Ruach HaKodesh. He says Ruach HaKodesh only to Shach and Taz. I would not use the word Ruach HaKodesh.
Oh, I thought it was.
You could say yes. That's true. That's why wherever there's more darkness, there's always more. Chassidus was revealed in the later generations as the deepest level of Torah, Primus HaTorah, and one of the reasons, precisely because deeper darkness needs more light, and also as a foretaste of an appetizer of Mashiach's coming. So that's correct. This principle, you could say, the darker it is, and you bring light there, you have to access even a deeper light. That's absolutely correct. We're going to learn about this more when we compare it to Tefillah, Mamata Lamaila, with what we talked about, Einoid, the distress of tshuva that comes from a very dark place. But this we're talking is in Torah. All this keep in mind, in Torah itself, these levels is all through Torah. Torah that's illuminating even the darkness, which is obviously the major chiddush, because it's one thing Torah illuminates Talmidei Chachamim and scholars and people who live and bask in the light of Torah. But can Torah illuminate and pierce the darkness of this world? And here clearly, yes, it can, because the Sheder Shemoker allows you to do that when you access it. Okay. Any other questions? Good. Okay, so we'll stop here, top of page 1386, end of the paragraph, the top paragraph. We'll go over it again, I'm sure. Very interesting stuff, can I say?
I have a question. It's too bad George isn't here, but I'm going to ask it anyways because we're winding up for a number of days, and we have side chats sometimes where he wants to connect it with the 2 Maimarim that we read, the Alter Rebbe and the Middle Rebbe, Meik Hashem Elokeinu. That integration that this second go around is all about. The question is, this effort by Chazal and specifically the Amoraim to draw out more Chochma and the details through Iyun, through the use of their intellect, frankly, the knowledge of Tanakh, their ability to be Mefaresh and Mevarer, the Sukkim of Tanakh, to support their understanding of the law, Jewish law. So that sounds a lot to me like the idea of, well, in one sense, Nera Hashem Nishmas Adam, the divine light is transforming the nefesh sechel enoshi, the human intellect, so that when, let's say, we now, for example, go study, if a person studies Gemara, and they have to think really hard to understand. Some of it's complicated, the logic and the
let me just stop you right here. Let me stop you, if I may.
Yeah.
We will get to this in Ayin Beis. He's going to come back to it on page 1463, where he's going to get back to Ner Hashem Nishmas Adam and Ner Mitzvah Torah Er. So the Rebbe Rashab is actually going to make the connection to those maimon. Doing that right now, what you're already saying is not totally accurate, just for the record. So he says it, he's going to explain it himself, and then we'll be very accurate. And he's referring to those Maimorim that we learned. The reason we learned those Maimorim is because the Rebbe Rashab based Ayin Beis on those Maimorim. We're not just connecting it to two random Maimorim. The Rebbe Rashab began this in 1350, and he's going to go back to it. He just doesn't finish it, and that we'll discuss then. So what you're addressing now is going to be addressed in the right context. But you know what? Look, at the end of the day, I have to teach you the way I understand it. I believe that I've said enough to connect it to the bigger picture. If somebody's not satisfied with that, whether you're George or anyone, I would just simply say, you can go back to the Maimorim of the Alter Rebbe, the Mittler Rebbe, and learn it yourself. But I will learn it, and we're going to teach it in order as the Rebbe Rashab. To me, that's the right, healthy way to do it, when the Rebbe Rashab elaborates on it.
Fair enough.
And as I said yesterday, the idea of neshamas and Torah, he's not really discussed yet. He will discuss it. Even before that page. I even gave the page number for that. He's going to get to the idea of how neshamas and Torah interact with each other. You have to remember, that's the point. The point that look, I don't need to tell you that I'm the one that initiated learning those Maimorim. Those Maimorim are the basis of what the Rebbe Rashab began at page 1350. He asked questions. There's a question on page 1350. The question is, what is the difference between neshamas and Torah? Do you remember that question?
Yes.
Yeah. So the Rebbe Rashab, we need to have an answer to that question. The question is, where do we get that answer? Do we find it now and try to guess it, or do we learn till the end and then we'll figure it out? So my approach is the latter. Let's learn it all, see what he says, and then we will find the answer. Even though in Ayin Beis he doesn't answer it, but in those Maimorim he does answer it. But it's after all these introductions that we're learning now.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
I hope I didn't come across too critical. I'm just pointing out the method that I'm using.
I don't think it that way. I know that George is a little, he just wants it a little bit more directly.
Listen, he can want what he wants, but there's other students and there's a teacher, and we have to all work together here, and there's a way to do it. Okay.
And then, by the way, anyways, to some extent, I think, whatever, it's fine. It's fine. He wants the question that I asked, I think he wants asked. So I'm kind of trying to do a favor.
It's fine, but the best favor is to learn to absorb and before we process, and to have a little patience, and you'll see it'll all emerge very beautifully.
But okay, well, I did have my own personal question. If just let's say, but really balabatish question, learning Gemara, me sitting here ignoramus, learning Gemara, if that helps transform my nefesh Bahamas and be sort of mavar my own baseness, if you will.
In the Maimorim of the Alter Rebbe and the Mittler Rebbe, he doesn't say Torah is mavar the nefesh Bahamas. He says Tefillah is mavar, Shema Yisrael. So first of all, if you want to be accurate, he says it on Shema Yisrael. The whole concept of the wick refining and drawing from the oil is about these bonus and Shema Yisrael and unity. That's what he says there. You're asking a question, does Torah also refine the animal soul? The answer is
exactly.
yes. but he's not discussed it yet. We're not even there. He didn't even get. So we have to first get back to Ner Mitzvah Torah, where he talks about. I'm sorry, where he talks about Shema rather, where that's what it actually does say, that the bir of the Nefesh Habamis. You don't see even the mention of Nefesh Habamis in the last 50 pages, right?
Correct. That's why we went to learn the
So
Ma'amrim.
why are we talking about it? If the Rebbe Rashab doesn't feel the need to talk about it, why are we discussing it?
Well, I explained it, and you did too. It's
because I understand why. Because you're processing in your mind where you're at. I'm trying to teach Ayin Beis, so I understand where you're coming from, and it's a fair question. However, it's not yet where we are in Ayin Beis. Right now, he's talking about the process of. You could ask that question: where's the Nefesh Habamis fit into this whole discussion here? That's a fair question. My answer would be is let's continue learning, and you'll see it's going to come back to it. He will come back.
Yeah, the question's not ripe yet. Okay, no, it's fine.
No,
George
it's
isn't
a
here,
fair
but
question, but that's Ayin Beis can't talk about everything all the time. So that's why you have to. The Rebbe Rashab brought the whole Nefesh Habamis on page 1350 through 1352, and then he said, to understand that, let's talk about Ur Hariyah. To understand Ur Hariyah, let's talk about Mikra, Mishnah, and Talmud. So that's what I'm doing. I'm going with the Rebbe Rashab's a formula and approach.
Understood.
And knowing full well that we have to get back to that. So I'm not saying this is never going to be addressed. I'm just saying the order of the narrative here is the way we're learning it.
100%. Thank you for addressing it. And sorry, I don't mean to push it.
It's fine. It's fine. But listen. But I'm specifically stating the method that I'm using. So you should understand the way the way it works.
100%.
Now that doesn't stop you from going ahead and reading it later, and seeing if you can figure it out. I have no problem. I didn't tell you don't do that. I'm just telling you what I'm doing in teaching it. Everybody can go further and see where this is how the plot's gonna unfold.
Here's a more interesting question.
If you go back, and I'll just say one more thing. And it's also not a critique. If you go back to the way I taught it from the outset, and especially when I taught the Maimer and the Alter Rebbe's Maimer, and then the places where I gave the overview of the connection, I actually addressed all these questions, just for the record. I'm not even referring to that right now, but I addressed it. I actually explained the context between the Tefillah, Nefesh Elikis, Nefesh Habamis, and Shema, and what the mitzvah does, and then what Torah does. So if you really go back to those classes, you'll find these answers to your questions, just for the record. And I didn't say that earlier because right now we're going to learn it in the direct, in the order that the Rebbe Rashab is teaching, but I did talk about it quite literally.
Yes.
Because in Maimer Torah, that's what he talks about. He starts with Nefesh Elikis, Nefesh Habamis, the Ner Hashem Nishmas Adam. Then he goes to Ner Mitzvah. Then he goes to Torah. So he talks about all three.
Yes, I do remember. Now, here's a more sort of interview question. Do you feel that the way you're teaching this, mostly we're going a lot of word by word. Sometimes you're going faster, or you're skipping parentheticals, or you're paraphrasing. But mostly we're going through it pretty detailed. But in general, do you feel that the way you're teaching this, and I can't compare each class versus the way you taught it the first time. So I ask you personally, do you feel that the way you're teaching it is maybe enriched or deeper, or perhaps even a slightly more sharper angle or something because of your own eon into those source materials as prior mimerim and your own ability to make these connections? I mean, what do you feel? Like, I don't know, you're not going back to watch yourself on all these classes either. What's your instinct?
My feeling is being that thank God I have good class here, a very cooperative students. I feel very comfortable that I'm doing exactly as I think is the best way to teach it.
I don't mean that. I mean the way you're teaching it, the actual explanation. Do you think it's altered by the extra learning you've done since the first time you taught it?
Absolutely. Absolutely, because we learned those two Maimarim from them, for months. We spent a bunch of months learning the Alter Rebbe's Maimer, the Mittler Rebbe's Maimer, and there's the other sources. So first of all, every time you learn something a second time, it's going to be deeper and richer and more comprehensive, but also informed by a lot of the things. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's my impression too.
Okay, good.
I personally don't, just so the record is very clear, I don't have any problem with the pace we're taking. I could do this, I could learn like this, God's willing, until I'm 120, for the record.
I understand. So we're fine. We're good. All good.
It's all good. It's wonderful.
I don't think George really has a problem either. He wants to make connections, which is fine, and there are ways to do it. So I have no complaint to him at all. I'm just responding the approach that I'm taking here. That's
Yeah.
okay. So we'll stop here, top of 38. I didn't even stop the